It was supposed to be just another peaceful night on the Pacific. On June 30, 2005, a commercial fishing boat named Freedom set sail from San Pedro, California, with 22 passengers and crew on board. Among them, a quiet, reserved 48-year-old lighting technician named Patrick McDermott, a man who had spent decades working behind the scenes on Hollywood sets. A man who had dated one of the most beloved pop icons of the 80s, Olivia Newton-John. That night, Patrick brought a backpack, a sleeping bag, and a ticket for the overnight trip. Nothing unusual. He was seen by multiple people. He ate. He slept. He chatted briefly with other passengers. But when the Freedom docked the next morning, Patrick was gone. Not a trace. Not a goodbye. Just vanished. His belongings? Still on the boat. His sleeping bag untouched. His car? Still parked at the marina. No signs of a struggle, no reports of a man overboard, no mayday call. Here's the part that shakes everything. No one noticed he was missing for over 24 hours. Not until he failed to show up for a family gathering. And even then, it took weeks before a missing persons report was filed. Now ask yourself this: how does a man vanish from a crowded boat without anyone seeing a thing? No cameras, no noise, no one raising an alarm. Does that sound like an accident or a plan? According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, over 600,000 people go missing in the U.S. every year. Most are found, but some just disappear. Their stories become cold cases, riddled with rumors, half-truths, and theories that sound more like movie scripts than real life. Patrick McDermott's story is one of those, but here's where it goes from strange to chilling. Patrick was broke. He owed thousands in back child support. He had recently declared bankruptcy, and just days before that fateful trip, he had begun taking mysterious steps, closing bank accounts, canceling credit cards, erasing digital footprints, as if he knew he wouldn't need them anymore. Then the sightings began. From tiny beach towns in Mexico to border crossings in Texas, people claimed to have seen him, alive, unbothered, even smiling. Private investigators hired by Australian tabloids claimed they tracked him to Puerto Vallarta. One said, "He's alive. He just doesn't want to be found." Was Patrick running from debt, from the law, from life itself? Or was he truly dead, and the rest just smoke and mirrors? In the next part, we're going to examine the evidence he may have planted before he vanished, and the one slip-up investigators say could prove it was all a setup, a single clue left behind on the boat that no one noticed at first. The Freedom returned to shore just after sunrise. People disembarked slowly, still groggy from the overnight trip. No one seemed concerned. No one sounded an alarm. It was only later, much later, that someone would ask, "Where's Patrick?" But when investigators finally boarded the vessel to search for answers, they found something strange in his assigned bunk. Folded neatly, as if he planned to return, were his personal belongings. A backpack with clothes, a wallet with some cash, a passport, and, most importantly, a small piece of paper with scribbled numbers. At first glance, it looked like a receipt or a phone number. But when forensics examined it more closely, they realized it wasn't random at all. It was a set of coordinates. Coordinates pointing, not to the ocean, but to a small marina in Mexico. Why would a man planning a fishing trip in California have GPS coordinates for a port 1,200 miles away? The theory began to form. What if Patrick never intended to return? What if this trip, this disappearance, was a carefully staged vanishing act? But there was more. Security cameras at the San Pedro Marina showed Patrick arriving alone that evening, carrying only a duffel bag and a sleeping roll. But curiously, he bought his ticket under a different name. Pat Kim. It was a name he had used before, blending his Korean heritage into a more anonymous alias. Harmless? Maybe, or maybe it was just the beginning of a well-orchestrated exit strategy. Authorities at first suspected an accident. Maybe he slipped and fell overboard. But the weather was calm. The boat was crowded. No one heard a splash. No one saw anything unusual. Even the Coast Guard was skeptical. "It's hard to believe," one officer said, "that someone could go missing from a boat with 22 people on board, and no one notices." Then came the finances. Patrick had recently filed for bankruptcy. He owed over $8,000 in child support to his ex-wife, actress Yvette Nipar. He was being hounded by creditors. His professional life was fading, and the shadow of Olivia Newton-John, his long-term partner, now a global celebrity, loomed over him. Was he feeling suffocated? Trapped? Friends later recalled that he had become more withdrawn in the weeks leading up to the trip. He avoided calls, missed appointments, talked vaguely about getting away. But no one thought he meant for good. Then someone came forward. A private investigator hired by an Australian TV show said he had credible evidence Patrick was alive and well, living under the radar in Mexico. He had allegedly followed a trail of financial transfers and blurry photographs to a beachside town popular with American expats. And there, he said, Patrick was seen, with a new identity, a new life, and no interest in returning. But why flee? Why abandon everything, including a woman who reportedly never stopped loving him? In the next part, we'll look at Patrick's relationship with Olivia Newton-John, the emotional bond they shared, the cracks that began to form, and why some believe she knew more than she let on. Because when someone disappears, sometimes the people closest to them are holding the key. From the outside, it looked like a love story straight out of Hollywood. Olivia Newton-John, the global superstar with a smile that could light up an arena, and Patrick McDermott, the quiet, rugged lighting technician who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. For nearly a decade, they were together, traveling, sharing homes, raising Olivia's daughter Chloe as a family. But beneath the surface, something was unraveling. Their relationship had always been unconventional. Patrick wasn't one for red carpets or interviews. He didn't crave attention. Quite the opposite. He was a man of structure, privacy, and control. Olivia, on the other hand, was a household name. Her face was on magazine covers, her voice on every radio station. Their worlds clashed more often than anyone admitted. By 2005, their romance had cooled. Publicly, they were on a break. Privately, things were more complicated. They still saw each other, still spoke. But Patrick had begun to retreat emotionally. Friends said he seemed weighed down, that he spoke less about the future and more about starting over. And then there was the financial pressure. After their breakup, Patrick was legally responsible for paying child support to his ex-wife, Yvette Nipar. But his income was unstable. Hollywood lighting gigs were drying up. He was falling deeper into debt. He'd filed for bankruptcy in 2000. Now, 5 years later, the walls were closing in. Imagine the weight of it all. Living in the shadow of one of the world's most beloved stars, crushed by debt, hounded by legal obligations, and slowly fading from the life he once knew. For some, it's unbearable. For Patrick, it may have felt like a trap he could never escape. But did Olivia know? She would later describe his disappearance as one of the most painful events of her life. She cried on live television. She issued statements. She begged for answers. But some questioned her reactions. Was she shocked? Or simply heartbroken by a man who left her without a goodbye? In an interview years later, she admitted, "I don't think I'll ever really know what happened." But privately, reports claimed she had been warned by people close to Patrick that he had been spiraling, that he'd hinted at leaving, that he was considering a new life. And here's where it gets even more curious. Olivia never hired private investigators. She never pushed for a deeper criminal probe. Despite having the resources, the influence, and a global fan base behind her, she seemed to let the matter fade. Some saw this as strength, others as a quiet acceptance. Was it grief or guilt? Because according to sources, Patrick had grown resentful of the spotlight. He once told a friend, "I feel like I don't exist when I'm with her." And for a man already drowning in legal troubles and personal shame, being invisible might have felt like the final blow. So when he boarded that boat on June 30th, 2005, was it just a fishing trip? Or was it his escape? In the next part, we're going to examine the sightings, the blurry photographs, the shocking interviews, and the digital trail that suggests Patrick McDermott may have never died at all, but instead simply slipped away. What if the dead could walk? What if someone everyone believed was lost never really left? In the years following Patrick McDermott's disappearance, something strange began to happen. Rumors started surfacing from the unlikeliest of places: fishing towns, border crossings, and beachside cafes along Mexico's Pacific coast. People claimed they saw him. Same face, same height, same quiet demeanor, and always alone. At first, no one took it seriously. After all, how many lookalikes are spotted every year? Thousands. But then a tabloid in Australia took a risk. They hired a team of private investigators, including former law enforcement officials and intelligence analysts, to track down the truth. What they uncovered would change the story forever. The team traced a digital trail, financial transactions, wire transfers, and even IP addresses that all pointed to a specific region: Puerto Vallarta, a picturesque coastal city in Mexico known for its expat communities and loose documentation laws. In 2009, after years of following leads, one investigator claimed, "We found him. He's alive, and he doesn't want to come back." They even published photos. Grainy, zoomed in, but unmistakable. A man sitting at a beachfront cafe, short cropped hair, sunglasses, a baseball cap. He looked older, thinner, but it was him. According to facial recognition experts hired by the investigators, there was a 90% match between this man and Patrick McDermott. Still, critics pushed back. They said the evidence was circumstantial. That facial recognition in uncontrolled environments is unreliable. That if Patrick were really alive, surely he would have been found by now. But more sightings kept coming. A German tourist claimed to have spoken with an American named Pat, who refused to give his last name and paid for everything in cash. A bartender in Sayulita swore a man matching Patrick's description had been frequenting the bar for years. Always alone, always polite, and never staying in one place for too long. And then there was the woman. In 2010, a Canadian traveler claimed she had dated a man she believed was Patrick. He used a different name. He told her he had walked away from a life that was crushing him. When she later saw his photo in a news article about the case, she nearly collapsed. "That was him," she said. "He was hiding in plain sight." Authorities were reluctant to act. Without fingerprints, a confession, or an official sighting by law enforcement, their hands were tied. But the mounting stories, from tourists, locals, and private investigators, painted a picture that was hard to ignore. Patrick McDermott may have faked his death, and succeeded. So why Mexico? Because in certain towns along the Pacific coast, it's incredibly easy for foreigners to disappear. No digital footprints, no social security numbers. Just cash, a new name, and the ocean breeze. For someone trying to escape debt, child support, and a very public past, it's the perfect hiding place. Still, questions lingered. If Patrick really was alive, how did he fund it? Who helped him? And could he stay hidden forever? In the next part, we'll dig into the conspiracy theory that rocked the media. The claim that Patrick had help from inside. People who knew, people who wanted him to vanish, and the whisper network that kept the truth buried for over a decade. Because disappearing alone is hard, but disappearing with help? That's a whole different game. Let's be clear. Faking your own death isn't just difficult. It's nearly impossible in the modern world. From surveillance cameras, to digital banking, to immigration databases, vanishing without a trace requires planning, precision, and most of all, help. That's why when Patrick McDermott disappeared, and the clues began pointing to a possible escape to Mexico, a new theory emerged, one that changed everything. What if he didn't do it alone? Consider this. Patrick had spent decades working in the entertainment industry. He wasn't a celebrity, but he wasn't invisible either. He was part of the machine, the crew behind the lights, the shadows of the spotlight. And in that world, he had contacts. People who knew how to move quietly, how to go off-grid, how to disappear. Investigators began examining the possibility that Patrick had confidants, people who helped him set up the exit plan, transfer money under the radar, and establish a new identity abroad. One name in particular kept coming up, a longtime friend from his early career days, someone with ties to both the film industry and international logistics. The man denied everything, but when private detectives followed a trail of encrypted emails and burner phone calls, they found something alarming. Communications sent from California to an unregistered number in Oaxaca, Mexico, just days before Patrick vanished. The sender, a known associate of Patrick's. The content of those messages? Still unknown, but the timing? Suspiciously perfect. Then there was the matter of the documents. Patrick had no travel itinerary past the fishing trip, no visible bookings, no passport scans. But someone had to know how to cross the border without triggering red flags. One theory suggests that he was transported by sea, smuggled south along the coast in a private vessel. Not unheard of, especially for someone with contacts in shipping or production companies that routinely dealt with marine transport. But the most disturbing theory? That someone may have intentionally sabotaged the investigation. In the weeks following his disappearance, there were delays in reporting him missing. Paperwork was misfiled. Interviews weren't conducted. And a few key witnesses from the fishing trip? They either declined to speak or gave contradictory statements. One claimed he definitely saw Patrick leave the boat. Another said he wasn't even sure Patrick had boarded at all. Too many inconsistencies, too many gaps. And here's where things get murky. One retired LAPD officer who reviewed the case stated bluntly, "This feels like a soft cover-up. Somebody wanted him gone, and somebody else wanted the world to believe it was an accident." Even Olivia Newton-John's name got tangled in the web. Not as an accomplice, but as someone who may have known, or at least suspected, more than she let on. After all, she never demanded a reopening of the case, never questioned the suspicious evidence, and in 2016, she quietly had Patrick declared legally dead, despite growing rumors that he was still alive. Was she trying to close a chapter of her life, or was it part of a larger unspoken agreement? In the next part, we'll explore the most controversial angle of the entire case: the insurance, the money trail, the policies Patrick left behind, and who stood to benefit from his death. Because in any mystery, if you follow the money, the truth starts to show its face. In any great mystery, there's one question that cuts through emotion, hearsay, and rumor. Who profits? When Patrick McDermott disappeared in 2005, the focus was on grief, confusion, and theories. But as time passed and the dust began to settle, a colder, sharper line of inquiry emerged: the money trail, and it revealed details that made this case far more than just a missing person story. Let's start with the basics. Patrick didn't just vanish with a backpack and a dream of freedom. He left behind life insurance policies. Multiple ones, in fact. According to records unearthed during later investigations, McDermott had several small to mid-sized insurance and pension plans from his work as a lighting technician, union-covered, legitimate, and payable in the event of death. At first glance, nothing unusual. But when investigators followed the timeline, they noticed something strange. Some of the policies had been updated just months before he disappeared. Beneficiaries were rearranged, contact details modified. One beneficiary was removed altogether, someone he had been close to during his Hollywood years. The person never received an explanation. Then came the big question: who ultimately stood to benefit? Here's where the situation gets murky. Olivia Newton-John was not a listed beneficiary on any of Patrick's policies, a fact that helped her publicly distance herself from financial suspicion. But another name, redacted in early filings, was later revealed to be his sister, a woman who remained publicly silent throughout the case. She never spoke to media, never issued a statement, never acknowledged whether she received any payout. Then came the 2016 court decision. Olivia had Patrick declared legally dead, 11 years after his disappearance. It was a move that sparked backlash from conspiracy theorists and McDermott's ex-wife alike. Yvette Nipar, the mother of his son, vocally opposed the declaration. She believed Patrick was still alive, and that the move would complicate any future attempts to reopen the investigation. But here's the twist. With the legal death declaration, the life insurance policies became payable. That means if Patrick had successfully faked his death and someone close to him collected those benefits, he may have indirectly funded his new life. Investigators also flagged a small trust that had been set up in California, funded through anonymous donations and one-time bank transfers. The account was drained just a few months after Patrick vanished, nearly $16,000 withdrawn in 3 days. The destination of those funds? Never confirmed. But one theory? That money was used to establish a life abroad, with cash in hand and no digital trail. Private investigators found no paper trail linking the money directly to Patrick. But the timing was impeccable. Too perfect to be coincidence. Even more suspicious? The fact that no family member ever filed a wrongful death suit. No pushback. No civil lawsuits against the boat company. No demands for deeper accountability. It's as if everyone just moved on. So we ask again, did Patrick McDermott fake his death to escape a life of debt and emotional collapse? And if so, did someone or several people help cover it up for financial gain? In the next part, we dive into the human cost, the emotional wreckage left behind. From Olivia Newton-John's silent heartbreak to the son who grew up with no answers, and the eerie silence of those who may know more than they're saying. Because money leaves a trail, but silence? That leaves a wound. Disappearances aren't just about the missing. They're about the people left behind. The ones who go to bed each night wondering, did he die? Or did he choose to leave me? For Olivia Newton-John, the disappearance of Patrick McDermott was more than a headline. It was a fracture that never fully healed. They had spent nearly a decade together. He had helped raise her daughter. They shared homes, holidays, quiet mornings, and late-night phone calls. He was, by all accounts, the man she thought she might grow old with, until he simply vanished. In the days after Patrick went missing, Olivia was quiet. Too quiet. Her publicist issued statements, and she avoided interviews. When she finally spoke, her words were measured, soft, almost haunting. I still hope he's alive. But if he isn't, I just want to know. Hope and grief collided in her voice. Friends close to Olivia said she was deeply shaken, that she questioned everything. Whether she'd missed signs, whether she'd pushed him too far with fame and distance. Others suggested she had come to terms with the possibility that Patrick had left voluntarily, and that the woman who had once filled arenas now lived with a hole no applause could fill. But the deepest silence came from someone else, Patrick's son. Born from a previous relationship with actress Yvette Nipar, Patrick's son was a teenager when his father disappeared. Suddenly, he became the boy with no closure, no answers, just an empty chair at family dinners, and a father whose name became tabloid fodder. Yvette fought fiercely to protect her son's privacy. She publicly condemned media outlets that sensationalized the case and criticized Olivia's decision to declare Patrick legally dead. "How can someone be declared dead when people keep seeing him alive?" she asked in a furious open letter. Her words were sharp, driven by rage, confusion, and protective instinct. Imagine growing up with the suspicion that your father might be alive, but didn't want to be found. That kind of abandonment cuts deeper than any mystery. It turns grief into identity. Even friends of Patrick, those who had worked with him for years in film and television, began to retreat from the conversation. Some admitted they were tired of being asked. Others simply refused to comment. The silence became deafening. And yet, sightings continued. Each one reopening wounds, each one pulling the people he left behind further into emotional limbo. Grief experts call this ambiguous loss, the kind of trauma that doesn't end, where there's no closure, no funeral, no proof, just a question mark where a life used to be. For Olivia, for his son, for his family, and maybe even for Patrick himself. Because if he is alive, if he really did walk away from everything, the guilt may never fully fade. The thought of people mourning him while he sips coffee on a beach, that's a burden no new name or fake passport can erase. In the final part, we'll examine the legacy of this mystery, what the case of Patrick McDermott tells us about modern disappearances, the limits of truth, and the one last clue that surfaced, years later, that may finally tip the scale toward closure or confirmation. 15 years passed, and still, no body, no definitive photo, no confirmed address, just questions. In a world where every click leaves a trace, Patrick McDermott remains one of the rare ghosts of the digital age, a man who, if alive, has managed to do the impossible: stay invisible. But then, something new surfaced. In 2020, a US-based journalist working on a documentary about cold cases received an anonymous tip: a scanned passport photo, a timestamp, and a name, William Martin. The image showed a man entering Mexico through a lesser-known port of entry in Baja California. He looked older, but the resemblance was stunning. Same cheekbones, same eyes, same scar on the chin. The photo was sent to facial recognition experts in 3 separate labs. 2 confirmed an 87 to 92% match to Patrick McDermott. 1 remained inconclusive. But the data reopened the case in the eyes of investigators, at least unofficially. The man in the photo had no criminal record, no digital trail. He traveled in and out of Mexico over the span of 6 years, always alone, always through land borders or sea entry points. And then the trail went cold again. Was it him, or another cruel coincidence? Forensic analysts who revisited the case pointed to a strange pattern. In nearly every major disappearance suspected to be voluntary, there's a final mistake, a slip, a credit card used, a friend contacted, a face caught on camera. But Patrick never slipped, not once, which raises an even more chilling theory. What if he didn't fake his death? What if he did fall overboard? What if all these sightings were just misidentifications? Human error playing tricks on desperate minds? If that's the truth, we'll never know. There was no official autopsy, no conclusive crime scene, just an empty bunk, a folded sleeping bag, and a man who stepped aboard a boat and never got off. To this day, Patrick McDermott remains classified by the U.S. Coast Guard as missing, presumed drowned. The case is inactive, the file is closed, but the fascination, the theories, the mystery, they live on because humans don't vanish like this. Not without help, not without intent. So we're left with 2 possibilities. 1, Patrick McDermott is dead, the victim of a tragic accident, lost to the sea and remembered in speculation. Or 2. Patrick McDermott is alive, somewhere in Mexico, sipping coffee under a new name, watching the world guess, and staying one step ahead. And maybe that's what haunts us most. Not the loss, not the silence, but the idea that someone could walk away from their life, from love, responsibility, pain, and never look back. Because in the end, the real question isn't what happened to Patrick McDermott. It's this: if you could vanish, would you?